I thought I'd show you what my preparations were before I did these. I told you that I pray about them, that I might include something that would be beneficial down the road to somebody. But I always keep my wife in mind, and she likes me to comb my mustache. Not necessarily for this, because she doesn't know that I'm even doing it, maybe, but she's always after me saying, you know, you really ought to comb your mustache if you're going to have one. So I thought I'd show you what I do and comb my mustache for you. Anyway, it's fun to be back with you. I hope it's caught you on a day that's been good for you, that you've enjoyed, that you've been filled with hope and blessed with an optimistic spirit and a thankful heart and all those kind of things. I've done some childish things in my life, and tonight I'm going to tell you about 3 of them. And there's a common denominator. You'll never guess what it is. Go ahead, guess. You'll never guess. The common denominator is frog legs. Yep, you heard it right. Frog legs. All right. So let me just tell you about some things from my youthful days, from when I was a child, when I did childish things, should we say? And what did frog legs have to do with them? Well, you're about to find out. So, on the farm, we usually tried to eat dinner as a family as often as we could, and it was usually quite often, especially the supper meal, and quite often the breakfast. But my mother made it a point to try to have something ready and gather us around the table, and we'd eat and talk. And I don't think people do that so much these days. I see people just eating on their laps and watching TV and different things, but there's really something quite beneficial about sitting around the table and just eating and talking. I hope you'll put that as a goal and try to work towards it, because there's nothing that comes on TV that will equal just sitting around the dinner and having a bite to eat, talking while you're doing it, finding out what went on in each other's day, and listening to thoughts and feelings and expressing concerns, and you name it. It's just something I think that's gone wrong with most of our country, because I don't think very many people do that on a regular basis anymore. But in the country life, we had working hours, and when my mother went out and waved the red flag out in the hayfield, toward the hayfield, or sometimes she'd usually just wave a white flag or a dish towel or something when it was a cloudy day. When it was a brighter day, she would flash a mirror towards us, and we could see that mirror flashing, and that meant it was time to come and eat. Well, that was usually the lunch meal, but we also got around at supper time. And first frog leg story comes at supper time. I mentioned doing childish things. My brother and I, my younger brother, I'm not sure if anybody else was involved in this planning or not. I don't think so. But we had discovered some time ago that people in the fancy restaurants in the city actually had frog legs as part of their menu items on a fancy menu. And we thought we were privileged because we had a low spot that went down through our pasture, and it was always wet and boggy, and there was lots of frogs, and they were pretty easy to catch. And so we had ourselves some frog legs. Ate just like the people in the fine diners did in New York and Los Angeles and wherever. We ate frog legs. We didn't eat them on the at the dinner table. We kind of kept it on the sly. So we'd have to get a can or something and build a little fire and cook them ourselves and see what it was like. But we ate frog legs, and it was when we were eating them. Once we didn't have very many at that time, but we were eating them, and we got this idea that maybe we could pull a trick on Mom tonight at the dinner table, because we knew she had already gotten the chicken out, and she was going to cook a chicken. She always fried it up. I don't know what she did, but she knew how to cook fried chicken, and it was delicious. Each piece of that chicken just really hit the spot. It was wonderful. However, one chicken usually wouldn't feed us all, and she never got two at a time that I can remember. She usually just get one, and somehow she'd make us, or we'd have our pieces of chicken, and she'd make a meal out of it as best she could. So my brother and I got this idea that if we cook some frog legs ahead of time, maybe just before supper time, out behind the barn or down that way, that we could cook those frog legs up. And here's our plan. Our plan was, when she wasn't looking, or when she'd turn her back to the dinner table, we'd get those frog leg pieces out, and they weren't, we'd take them off the bone, so there was no bone there. It was just frog leg meat. And if you got the upper part of the frog leg, it was, it's a little chunk of meat on each leg. And we had several of them, and we got them cooked up. So Mom's putting a nice finish. Potatoes and gravy always went with chicken, and just really good. Corn, vegetables, some sort. Always milk, because we lived on a dairy farm, and milk wasn't free, but it was always available and cheaper than a lot of things we could buy at the store. If we didn't want water, we had milk. So there we were, eating all those things and getting towards the end, and Mom was always concerned that there's, make sure everybody had enough. Get us an extra scoop of potatoes, or an extra scoop of corn, or something that we needed. And she turned her back, and we did our dastardly deed. We pulled out those frog leg pieces, and I would think there would probably been maybe 6 or 8 pieces of frog leg meat, and we kind of breaded them when we cooked them a little bit, so they looked almost like the chicken that she was serving. Same coloration and everything. Not quite, but we came close. But we put those frog leg pieces, mixed them in amongst the chicken when she wasn't looking. It was all there on the plate. And so then we all grabbed our pieces of chicken and our potatoes and veggies and whatever, and milk, and we ate and enjoyed it. And the result we were hoping for was that if we left those little pieces on the plate, and we kind of notified everybody that was, the kids anyway, kind of knew that we were pulling a prank on Mom. I don't think we ever did tell Dad. And in fact, I can't remember for sure if he was even at the table, but I'm now that I think about it, I think maybe he wasn't, because I can't remember his reaction. But we put those in there, and everybody ate. And of course, Mother's, I didn't realize it till later in life, but I don't think she even had a piece of chicken. It was all gone before she before we were done. It was gone, and we hadn't even thought about her. And she probably wanted a piece of chicken, and she didn't get it. But this time, there were a few crumbs kind of left on the table, or up the plate, the chicken plate, there on the table, and she, to our delight, we were dastardly deeds we performed in our childish ways. We watched, and sure enough, she couldn't resist, and nobody else was eating them, and she reached out, grabbed one, and put it in her mouth. I laugh just thinking about it. And we didn't dare look up at her, but we knew what was going on. And so we kind of kept our heads down and kept munching away at whatever we had on our plate a little bit. And she reached down and she got another one and then another one. Pretty soon she had 4 or 5 pieces of frog leg meat in her mouth and seemed to be really enjoying it. She was having a good time, enjoying what little bit of chicken she could get. In this case, it wasn't chicken, it was frog legs, and we were the only ones that knew it. Well, you can guess it. At about that time, we couldn't hold back anymore. We just burst out laughing, and we just told her, we said, "You fell for our trap. We put frog legs on the table, and you got a whole mouthful of them, and you're eating them and enjoying them, and you said you'd never eat one," because she did tell us that earlier when she found out we were eating some. She told us she would never eat a frog leg. And there she was with a whole mouthful of frog legs. And we just busting a gut, laughing that our trick worked so darn well. I'll never forget. As soon as we told her, and it was like, I don't know if I can demonstrate it or not, but it was like, and she'd dig in with her mouth, stick her finger down her throat, try to get those chicken chunks out of her mouth as fast as she could, kind of spitting and gagging all at the same time. And by this time, we were just almost rolling on the floor, seeing how she reacted. Well, so who could forget something like that? So that's my first frog leg story. And you got to admit, it was maybe not quite as good listening to it as it would have been if you'd actually done it, but it was memorable beyond compare. We tricked her into eating frog legs. Now, I'd have to say that when she was gagging and spitting after she told us, because I think she was actually enjoying the frog leg meat, thinking it was chicken. But after we told her, she really kind of, I think, exaggerated the whole thing and just made it, once she knew she'd been pranked, well, she just went along with the prank and exaggerated her reaction all that much more. Of course, that made it more enjoyable for us, which is, I think, what she intended to do, which kind of says something about her, doesn't it? Makes a statement about her that instead of reacting like she might have otherwise, she rolled with the punches and just brought out the best in this circumstance, which in our case made our stomachs ache. We were rolling with laughter so much. And she did, I don't know if she ever swallowed one or not, but I think she actually did swallow one or two, that she had some in her mouth that she could have had if she'd just been a little more daring and not let us spook her quite so bad. So anyway, that's story 1, frog legs. And it was a prank for sure that we landed. And you ever ask yourself how you'd react if somebody landed a prank like that on you? We all should really ask ourselves that question. I would hope that we do it kind of like she did. Just roll with the punches and play along. Keep madness and all that out of the picture entirely, and just enjoy the moment, experience, and bonding and whatever took place there. Well, the next experience that I'll relate, having to do with frog legs, was when I was in freshman class of high school. I was in a general science class. And it so happened that the coach of the school was also a teacher of general science. And the way he figured grades at the end of the quarter is he'd get all the points and the quizzes and all that we had. We'd write it. We'd calculate the numbers and tell him what numbers we ended up with. And of course, he had a record too. But he was a great guy. His name was John Hyde, and he's dead now. But he had quite an influence on me. And I won't go into all that right now, but people influence you more than you think. He's what I would call a man's man. He just was one of those kind of guys. And I looked up to him. He had a lot of good qualities. All right, so back to general science. We'd put our numbers on the board, and he'd look at all the numbers and stack them up and see who scored the most and who scored the least, and kind of had them descending on the board and then another column and keep descending. And so you ended up with 2 or 3 columns up there with gradually descending points depending on how you did. And the way he did it is a little different than most. He'd look at it and he'd see how they were grouped, and he'd say, well, those right there at the top with those points very close to each other, we'll just give them A's. And then he'd say, but look, there's quite a gap between these and these, and so we'll draw the line right there and give the others B's. Sometimes break it into pluses and minuses if there was some sort of mitigating point variation or whatever that he wanted to consider. And then we'd go C's and D's and on down. And I don't know that he ever gave F's, but we looked at them. Well, so I was looking at my points, and as I remember it, I was in the B category, but it wasn't too far away from the A category. Just, not too far. I thought he might have drawn the cutoff line a little below me so that I'd been grouped with the A's, but he didn't. He drew it above me, which meant I was grouped with the B's, and I think I made my case. As I remember, I raised my hand and said, that's not very far off. Is there something I can do to get just a few more points to get me up there so I can cross that line and get into the A category? And this was a class discussion. I wasn't talking to him in private or anything else. And he was kind of a character. And he says, well, I can't think of anything that it'd be. He says, whatever it'd be, it'd have to be something pretty powerful and pretty convincing. And I don't know why, but I said, what could I do? Is there something I could bring you? A piece of cake? Some candy? What would it take to just bribe you to get me going? Just a few points higher to get into that A range. I never knew if I could quite believe him or not, but I actually made an offer. I said, well, if you don't like candy and eggs and cupcakes or whatever else I could bring you, I said, and I paused a little bit, I said, what if I brought you some frog legs? And he kind of paused just like that, waited at me and looked at me, and he said, where would you get frog legs? And I said, I know a place. And he paused again, and he said, yeah, I don't think that'd be worth it. I don't suppose that's what I'm going to go for. But I could tell he was thinking just a little bit, so I kept stretching it out a little bit. I said, what if I bring frog legs for everybody in the class? Because some of the rest of them were starting to wonder how I was going to get away with this point raise thing and get a better grade. I said, what if I brought frog legs for everybody in the class? Well, guess what? That was enough to push him over the line. And he said, I'll tell you what, if you know where to get frog legs and you cook them up and you bring frog legs for everybody in this class, and there's about 26 people in the class, if I remember right, 26, 23, something like that. He said, you bring frog legs for everybody in the class, I'll give you 15 points. Well, I looked at the board, and 15 points would have put me up into the A category, or just so close that he couldn't possibly exclude me if I got that job done. So he said, you bring them and I'll give you 15 points. And I looked there, I figured I can pull this off. So I'll never forget, I went home that night. As soon as I got off the bus, I took off to the slough and changed my clothes and hurried and ran down to the slough. And oh man alive, I started getting frog legs, and luckily there were plenty of them. And I harvested about 25 frogs, and of course got the legs and went to work. And now at this point in time, this again shows you what kind of mother I've got, because I told Mom the whole story. I said, look, I got to have 15 points. And I'm going to get the frog legs, but I might need some help cooking them and getting them ready. And she bought into that idea. She says, you get the frog legs and bring them up here, and I'll help you. We'll get them cooked just right and breaded and whatever we need to do to make them look nice and tasty. And then and we wrapped them. I remember we wrapped them all individually in tin foil. So then I go to general science the next day. And yeah, you guessed it, I was kind of the topic of discussion. And we didn't even start class before he asked me, he said, so did you get your 15 points? Have you earned your 15 points yet or not? And up to then I hadn't said anything. But I had a little paper sack, and it had all those tinfoil pieces with the frog legs inside the tinfoil. I shook my head. Yep, I got them. I'm going to get those 15 points. And so I showed him what I had in my bag. He just looked at me and shook his head in unbelief. And he couldn't back out now. But there was one girl in the class. Oh, man. Oh, when I told them that I'd pass out everybody some frog legs, she just started moaning and groaning that she was not going to eat frog legs. And there was two other girls that were like that too, as I remember. I can still remember, I won't name their names, but they were not going to eat frog legs, no matter what. And I gave them a little spiel about how good they were and how they taste just like chicken, you know, how that story goes. Anyway, so I passed them out, and 22 or 3 little chunks or packages of frog legs, and the class kind of went still. I remember I was waiting to see what the reaction was, and he says, okay, let's open them. And so we opened them, and some ate them, enjoyed them, and some refused to eat them, and some took one little bite and started gagging and different things, all kinds of the whole gamut of reactions to my frog leg servings. But I wasn't so concerned about that. Let's face it, I needed 15 points, and then I figured I'd earned them. So it didn't take long to eat the frog legs or throw them away. So that part didn't last so long. But when we were done, I said, so we agreed, and you said you'd give me 15 points, right? And he said, yes, I did. And he gave me 15 points. And went up and changed my numbers on the board, because they were still on there from the day before. As I remember it, we were in a corner of the board, and he gave me the points and went up and changed my numbers. But then he didn't change the line. And I thought, I don't know, I think that was part of the agreement that you change the line too. And he said, no, actually, I just said I'd give you the points. Well, I had to go in after school and negotiate the rest of that because he wasn't about to cave in front of those other kids. I could see that. Actually changed my grade for the sake of a few frog legs. He might have had parents calling him up. I don't know. Anyway, that's beside the story. I actually did go in and talk to him, and we kind of split the difference and did pretty well, but I think I got an A- or something out of the class. But I've never forgotten the experience, and partly because of everybody's reaction, but especially my mom, she was just all in on it. And I don't think very many moms would have been all in on taking frog legs to everybody in your general science class, but she was. So I was grateful for that. Now, frog leg story number 3. And this one I thoroughly enjoyed at the time, but it gave me pause afterwards. Let me explain. I had a cousin, and he came over to my house, and he was a few years older than me, and he had a 22. Oh, I had a 22 too, as an old single shot, but he had a 22, and I think his was a pump action or something. And we went down to the slough. Parents didn't watch us with guns like they do nowadays, and you'd be scared to let your kids go off with guns, but we did it all the time. And we went down to the slough, and yep, there was still some frogs down there. Went into a different part of the slough where it was a little further away than we'd been getting them before, and boy, we ran into a whole bunch of them. And he shot them with his 22. Well, guess what? We found out that's a pretty slick way to do it, because if you shot a frog with a 22, all that was left was the legs. You could just see the legs, and that'd be it. And so you just pick up the legs and put them in a can, and we had a can with us, gallon cans, I remember it. And then we'd go look, and pow, another set of frog legs, and pow, another set of frog legs. Well, it didn't take us very long. This is on a Saturday. It didn't take us very long till we had, that gallon can wasn't right full, but I'll bet it was better than half full of frog legs. And we thought, well, there's no sense getting frog legs unless you're going to eat them. And I was a little hesitant to take those up to my parents, because I don't know if they'd want me shooting that many frogs and eating them. So we went over to his house, and out in the back of his house, he had an old, it was kind of a chimney-looking affair where they used to have barbecues or something, I guess, back in the day. But his parents weren't home. But we got the gas grill and started it up, and he went in the house and got some butter, and he brought it out and dropped it in that can of frog legs, and we didn't really fry them. We kind of boiled them in butter, but they were good, and we gorged ourselves on frog legs. I've never eaten so many frog legs in my life as I did that day. And then this is a little side story too, because after we got done with the frog leg banquet, should we say, didn't have anything to go with it, just frog leg. So we went in his house, and his mom had a rather large bottle of maraschino cherries in her cupboard. I don't know why we were looking around for something to eat, but we noticed those maraschino cherries, and we tasted one. It wasn't half bad. We kind of liked it. Anyway, long story short, we ate that whole bottle of maraschino cherries, and it would have been I don't know, it would have been more, it would have been a pint at least of maraschino cherries, if not more. And we ate the whole bottle. It hadn't even been opened when I saw it. Before we got done, we'd eaten the whole bottle. So then I went home, and nothing was said too much about it until the day or two later. My mother gets a call from my Aunt Agnes, who was this cousin's mother. And she said, "Did Reed come home drunk the other day?" And she said, No. Why would you ask? What's going on? And she said, "Well, I looked up in the cupboard, and I had a whole big bottle of maraschino cherries up there, and they're all gone. Even the juice is gone. And I'm just sure that somebody drinking that much maraschino cherries, eating that many maraschino cherries and drinking all that juice would be drunk, because I guess there's some sort of fermenting process that goes into keeping those maraschino cherries like they're supposed to be." Anyway, so my mom hits me up about it, and I said, yes, we ate the maraschino cherries, and I didn't know that was a no-no, that big of a no-no, and we enjoyed them, and yes, I did it, and I'm guilty. I did that childish thing, and I'm sorry. And so it kind of dropped right there. I often wondered if he didn't tell his mother that I ate them all instead of him helping me eat them, but I never pursued that. So anyway, that was the combo: frog legs and maraschino cherries. You ought to try that someday. When you want to do something really childish, a little bit on the foolish side, why, try a frog leg banquet topped off with some maraschino cherries. Crazy things. So anyway, those are my frog leg stories, and I have to tell you that after that shooting spree that we did with those frogs, I kind of felt bad about it, because I don't want to say those frogs are really my friends, but I'd kind of grown used to them down in the slough when I was getting the cows from the pasture. They'd jump around, and I'd throw stuff at them, and they'd jump again. And I never thought to kill them and eat their legs until just lately, but I made a slaughter of them. I since tried to look it up. I think from what I could tell, they must have been called leopard frogs or something. They had big green spots on them. And I've often wondered, in fact, it's kind of haunted me a little bit, because I'd often wondered if I went back to that slough today, if those leopard frogs, if that's what they were called, ever recovered from that summer and spring when I'd decimated the population with some foolish frog leg cravings, I guess you'd call it. And I never had another frog leg after that. I just lost my taste for frog legs. But they sure made some memories for me. And I've thought about the foolishness of it all, and how, like I said, we passed through stages of development. Well, I passed through the frog leg eating stage of development. And with the 2 or 3 experiences that I'll never forget, but at the same time, I probably should have never done, because those poor frogs, they probably thought they'd been declared war on in the worst possible way. So anyway, I thought of a scripture, and I actually kind of knew what I was going to talk about today, so I looked it up. And this best describes this best describes me and my frog leg experiences. When I was a child, this is in 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 11 says, "When I was a child, I spake as a child. I understood as a child and thought as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things." Well, somewhere after that whole frog leg experience and all of them and the different things that we experienced without giving it much thought, after all those childish things now, when I look back on it as a man, yeah, I put it away. And I'm glad that I put it away. I must have grown into a little bit of manhood coming out of that experience, because from that point forward, I kind of felt sorry for those poor frogs. I mean, think about what that must have been like for them. But I did it. I'm guilty. All I can do is repent and try to do better and put away childish things, even though when I think back on them, they still give me a chuckle. And it probably shouldn't even be that way, because if I really felt bad, I wouldn't chuckle. So maybe I'm still in the process. Anyway, that's my frog story, and 3 of them, and 3 frog stories is all you're going to get out of me, because my frog stories ended after all that. Now, if you want to start it up, you're more than welcome to, but keep in mind, you might regret it later. Hey, I hope you don't think of me as some stupid old goofy guy that never learned things properly, because I'll confess I didn't. It's taken me a long time. It's taken me quite a while to figure out how I should have felt, and it shouldn't have taken that long. So anyway, I'm going to shut down, and if you tell these stories, make sure you add the part that says, "I felt bad in the end, and I'm sorry, but I still chuckle." All right. Love y'all. Bye.